Awesome. So for your project 3, if you take a look at the instruction manual here, it's down inside of the Moodle course page. You'll notice that essentially what you're doing is you're working with something that's called raw photopy, RAW. And why we call it raw photopy is that that's more of the original image than something like a JPEG or PNG, which is what we're used to working with. And you can kind of think of it as you're cooking up something with the raw materials itself. So that's why they call it raw photopy, because when we create a JPEG or a PNG, we're actually creating it to be a type of new image that's compressed and has smaller sizes, but because of that, it doesn't maintain its raw qualities. And the reason that we do raw photopy sometimes is that we have a lot more control over the image, and we can do some cool stuff with it that we can see inside of our project 3 here. So before we start up with project 3, I just want to do a very quick run through, and if you would like, you can follow along with this, but because again our participation for today is the mid-quarter evaluations, I won't be expecting anyone to submit this. You can if you'd like. I'd be impressed. But if you go into your folder for new files, in session 7, I just have a practice ARW file. Now, straight away, before you start working with this, you might notice that this is very different from what we're used to, right? Why don't we take a look at our other sessions? Do we see at the end we have a JPG, which is our JPEG file. We have a PNG, which is our other types of file we work with, as you can see here. Bunch of interesting items. But now we have an ARW. So what does ARW stand for? Well, if you see here, and again, this is inside of your syllabus, if you take a look at session 6, and you have these open raw photos online here, there's a few different types of raw photopy files that we can work with. Now, if you see here, we have a DNG and NEF, and what these are referencing, as they sound very complicated, they're actually referencing some type of camera brands and some other photo options. And for our quiz 2 that we're going to be taking later, I'll go ahead and explain it in way more detail. But all you need to know is that these types of files are raw formats, and they do not contain a compressed image. They're pretty much the original type of image in a sense. And if you see here, the fourth item is ARW, and that aligns very well with our ARW down here. Now what I'm going to do is just drag our practice ARW into my photopy here, if it works. And you'll notice right away, this is very different than what we're used to. We actually get this little pop-up that says raw photopy. Now, this is essentially what gives us more options and, more, what's the word for it? Control over what the type of image we have here and what we can do with it. And the main thing that we can do here, as referenced here as well, is you can adjust the white balance, how much whiteness is inside of your image, and the contrast and exposure. So before you even start editing the image, you can actually go ahead and make the image in a very different way. You can make it very blue. And if you see here, there's a color chart. So if I increase the tint and the temperature, you'll notice that the colors of the whiteness get a bit lower, but the different colors get higher. And if I reduce the tint and the temperature together here, you'll notice you can get some pretty interesting effects. And again, it's all up to you on what you would like to do here. You can make it, I don't want to overexpose it to blind anyone, but you can make it kind of underexposed. You can make the contrast a bit bigger. And if you increase the contrast, you'll know that the darker gets darker and the whiter gets whiter. And again, if I have some more whiteness and I increase the contrast more, the brightness gets a bit brighter while the darkness gets a bit darker too. So why I'm fiddling around with this is that in your project 3, when you open up the file that's expected for your project 3, it will bring up something called raw photopy. And of course, because these instruction manuals have all the parameters, you can see what parameters you can set it to. But it could definitely be interesting to fiddle around with as well. But I just want to expose everyone to what these tools are, because it is very useful. Great. So after we go ahead and set our ideas here, let me pull that over there. you can go ahead and hit open, and then it actually brings in your photo into the normal photo P like we're used to. So now this is still a raw photo P option, but we're able to modify that to start before we even get into what we're used to with photo P. Whoops, someone was in the waiting room. Sorry about that. Whoever's in the waiting room, sorry about that. But I am recording this, so that's fine. Awesome. And so, again, per the syllabus as well, there's a few things we can work with, such as the levels and saturation, the advanced coloration, color correction, and white balance is what we did earlier with our raw photo P slider, moving it around. And how do we adjust levels and saturations here? Well, if you go ahead and go to the bottom of your layer pane, you'll see you have a bunch of items here that you can select around with, and one of them there is this half white, half black adjustment layer. So I can click on that, and if I go all the ways up here, you'll see an option called levels. Now if I go ahead and select levels, you'll notice that the PRO, the properties, tab that's at the top here will pop up, and I can actually mess around with some of the levels adjustments as I would like. Now, what this is referenced to as, some of you might be familiar with the word, is a histogram. And that's essentially just a graph that can change as we modify our values here. But I would just keep in mind that the levels uses a histogram to tell you what's going on, because that is one of the quiz questions. But again, during the quiz review, I'll review these more in depth. But it just brings up a histogram you can mess around with. Now, what's the point of doing this, right? Well, the reason we want to do this is, if, as you can see here, let me do this again. I can take one of these squares, this white, gray, or black square, and make my image darker by dragging it across. I can make it a lot brighter by dragging the white square this way. And I can make it a bit more neutral by kind of determining where the gray square goes. So if you kind of want it to be more on the light side, maybe a little bit less, you could definitely drag the gray square over some more. And then down here is a similar function, except it offers, it operates on a bit of a different spectrum here. You can see here that the overall image gets darker again. And then if I reduce this one up here, it gets a bit lighter as well. Sorry about that. But in general, these tools are very helpful for making it a bit more colorful if you like. And during the Project 3, this image sometimes isn't the best one because the Project 3 image is a nicer image to show the effects of it. But the same concepts apply, where you can mess around with the the levels, and make it brighter or darker as you see fit. Now that's essentially what the adjustment levels and desaturation does for you there. And, that's what the adjustment levels are with the colors of the black and white. Now, if you want to add in a saturation layer, and again, saturation determines how saturated your image is or how the colors come out of it. And what we could do is, again, go down to the bottom here, select our white or half black, half white circle. And then you'll see here we have an option that says hue and saturation. Now, if I click on that, you'll notice that, and this might be familiar to some of you already because we did this before, but again, you can change the hue to make the overall image color change. You can upgrade saturation a bit as well if you'd like. You can increase the lightness, make it a bit darker if you'd like as well. Up to you how you would like to do these. But again, I just wanted to show off these tools because for your Project 3, you're going to be working around with a few of these. And while it does show you the numbers to plug in for that project, sometimes it can be a bit confusing finding where they're located. And the cool thing about this is that if you see here, we have an option called range. And this is the color range that you're going to be choosing from to increase. So you'll notice I have a ton of green in my image, so I can actually click green. And you'll see that if I go back to my master applies it to everything, but my green actually has different settings. So I can actually increase saturation of green in my image here. Trying to make it a bit bigger. It's a bit hard to see. But you'll see there, because it's the max amount, I have very heavily saturated the green in my image. but the red in my image is still the same. That looks a bit like purple down at the bottom left, or magenta, so I can also increase the saturation of that color. And now you'll see again that it kind of gets a bit grainy, but because I'm just doing this as an example, it's going to look weird. But you could definitely sample certain colors from your image here in order to apply new effects. I'm just going to hit reset up here. And in the project, they want you to put your red saturation at 15. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that as well. But again, this is up to you guys on how you would like to mess around. I just want to show you what the raw photo P is capable of, and how you can add in these adjustment layers. Now, if we take a look back at our syllabus again, we'll see here that we have using the healing brush tools to remove blemishes. Now again, you might be getting flashbacks to our DM140 where we use that tool all the time. The healing brush tool is located on the left side here. If you go ahead, there's a spot healing brush tool and the healing brush tool. Because we're going to be messing around with the healing brush tool, see here, or actually, sorry, let's just do the spot healing brush tool as it's easier. The spot healing brush tool is a brush that you can right click and then change the properties of it as well. I'm going to increase the size of it. And what does it do again? Well, whoopsie-daisy, make sure your layer is selected there. All it does is it allows you to kind of fix up an image. There's a few blemishes on the image that you're working with for project 3, but you can see here that when I select some of these flowers with my spot healing brush tool, I'm able to remove them from my image because the spot healing brush tool uses the background of the image to kind of just replace what's on the foreground. So now you can see that I had a bit more flowers in the front here, but I went ahead and got rid of them. And sometimes it might work a bit worse than other times. Let's see if it works up here. It looks pretty good back there, and you'll notice something that's really cool, if I can flip back between these without it lagging too much, is that the image has no idea what's going on behind the flowers at the left side here. But if I use the spot healing brush tool, it shows that there's a leaf behind it. So it kind of uses some artificial intelligence to imply what's going on back there. We don't need to worry about that though, that's a bit too complicated, but all we need to worry about is that the spot healing brush tool can be very helpful for fixing up some images. Awesome, and now there's two more items I wanted to show off here, which is the dodge and sponge tools. And the dodge and sponge tools are very new tools that we haven't used so far, and they're very interesting because what they do is they can add contrast or saturation to your image as you would see fit. What that means is that you can make your image a lot brighter or darker. Now, where do you go ahead and find the contrast, sponge and dodge tool? Well, if you go ahead and your photo P and you go all the way down to this kind of magnifying glass one, that's, there's also the zoom tool, which is the left magnifying glass. This one up here that looks kind of like a lollipop or something, or a frying pan, is called the dodge tool. Now again, the dodge tool is a brush, so I can right click with my tool and increase the size of it. And I'm just going to show off an example of what this tool does. If I go ahead and use my tool to draw across, you'll see here that I actually make my area a bit brighter. What you could do with the dodge tool is increase the brightness of some areas of your image. So maybe I like how bright the lake is. I can add in a bit of an effect here with the dodge tool. And it's a pretty minute effect, but you could see here, if I can handle it properly, that you can achieve some pretty cool effects by just adding a bit of the dodge tool into your image. It kind of just makes some lightness pop out a bit more and is useful for showing off cool elements of your image here. Now, if you right click, you have another tool called the sponge tool. And again, the sponge tool is a brush tool. And what does the sponge tool do? The sponge tool increases the saturation of your image. So if you have some area of your image that you really want to make pop out, like really colorful, like maybe for instance these flowers over here, you can use the sponge tool and just click on them. And you'll see here, bit by bit, that the redness of these flowers gets a bit more red and its counterparts there with the purple. So the sponge tool is a really good way to go ahead and increase the kind of brightness of your image. But where are these tools located? Well, again, they're on the middle of your Photopea tool set, kind of like the frying pan lollipop. That's your dodge tool. You can hit O on your keyboard to get to the shortcut to use them. Dodge tool is in there, and then the sponge tool is underneath it. Now again, I'm working on a file that isn't your Project 3 file, but the same concepts apply, and I just wanted to show off a different version of raw Photopea so you guys could reference this for help with your Project 3. Now the last thing I want to take a look at is the skin tones that we can adjust. And the skin tones, of course, because I'm using an image that isn't a person, I can't access the skin tones, but what you can do is select the type of color that you want to sample in order to adjust the type of color in the rest of the image. That sounds very complicated, but essentially what you need to do is if you go up to select and then color range, you're able to go ahead and in your image here, try to select some colors that you would like to use. So I'm going to left click on some type of image here. You know what? I like the green of the grass, so I'm going to click it. And you'll notice that the image pops up with black and white to show you what is selected and what isn't selected. So the items that are white are green, and the items that are darker don't have as much green in them. Now, what's the point of this? Well, you can increase the range of these guys. Let me try to increase the fuzziness of it. See here. And if I can hit OK after I do this, well, I kind of butchered my image here. So what I'm going to do instead is let me go to select color range again. Let me just try to select some green. And I'm going to make the fuzziness of it be, I think 87 is what it says in the project. And now it seems like this example isn't doing it too well. But if I can go to select and deselect after that, you'll see that I increased the color a little bit. Oh, sorry. What it was selecting was everything of that color. And after I have that item selected, you can then mess around with that color too. So let's see here. So one more time, the select color range option essentially selects colors that are in that color range, hence the name. So I can go click on the green or the blue down here as well. And you'll notice that the color range of those items are selected. So I can hit OK. I have everything selected in my image that is of green. And then what we can do, so let's see here. We can go ahead and go down to the, let's see if we can find some curves here. If I go down to the adjustment option one more time, new adjustment layer, I can click on that. I can go up to curves, that is right here. And then after my curves loads in, while I still have my options selected, I could go ahead and modify the type of color I'm working with. It's kind of hard to see. Oh, don't want to do that. I can hit reset. Awesome. I can kind of make the colors a bit more green, a bit more fuzzy as well. And what I can also do is the channel. I can change the channel to be green. And now if I change the channel to be green because I'm working with grass, I can then kind of modify how the grass is working as well. You don't really need to do that though for your project. I would say keeping it on red, green, blue is fine. But it's definitely interesting to fiddle around with this stuff and see how it operates on your objects. So I'm going to do that. After I have it done, I can go to select and deselect. And now it's very minute, but I changed around my green a little bit and made the green pop out a tiny bit more. And it's fun to just mess around with these as the selection is still there after it as well. So if you see here, I have a CUR I can double click on. And then I can actually mess around with this curve. And it's what's to the right of the CUR, if you see here, this type of thumbnail, is the selection that we used in the select color range part of our example here. Now, essentially, we went through a bit there and we were adjusting grass tones inside of this one instead of the skin tones, but the same principle applies. And the reason I wanted to go ahead and show this is so that you can reference this during your project 3 in case you didn't know which area to go to or anything like that. Awesome. So